So after years of trying, WB Games recently were able to officially patent the Nemesis System from the Shadow of Mordor and War games, giving them the legal right to go after anyone who dares to copy them. So I wanted to discuss that today. Before I jump into things, please remember, if you enjoy the video, hit that like button, and subscribe if you want to continue to bitch about video games with us in the future. So the patent, which goes into effect February 23rd of this year and will last until 2035 if they keep up with the fees in that, is filed as, quote, Nemesis characters, Nemesis forts, social vendettas, and followers in computer games. The patent covers a system featuring procedurally generated NPCs that exist in a hierarchy and interact with and will remember the actions of the player, have their appearance/behavior altered by players, and whose place in that hierarchy can change and affect the position of other NPCs in said hierarchy. If you're not familiar with the Nemesis system in these games, basically it's like you have these orc generals and they can kind of move up in the ranks in the orc army, have fights with them, and then in a later fight they'll remember who you are and like reference your fights in that. You can also like possess them and bring them over into your army. So yeah, basically they're saying anyone who tries to copy this system is going to be in violation of this patent. To start off, I think patenting game mechanics in general is completely stupid, a hindrance to the industry. To act like literally everyone doesn't borrow ideas, build on them, change them a bit, or even outright copy in some instances is ludicrous. The Shadow of Mordor games, they've got the free flow combat system that's lifted directly from the Batman games. Granted, that's another WB game. The whole climbing the towers and surveying the area to uncover stuff in your surroundings is ripped right from Assassin's Creed. Like, come on. And I'm not trying to call them out here. I'm saying this is what everyone does. And these sorts of patents only make it harder for people to continue to create and make better versions of the stuff that came before. And yeah, they're saying, as everyone does, that, you know, they're protecting their creation, their specific version of this, but anyone familiar with like patent trolling knows how the system is often abused. And it's like, if you're thinking of doing something similar, are you going to even want to risk the possibility now of having some legal fight with WB, or are you just going to decide to do something else? And this isn't the first time we've had this problem, far from it. Probably the most notable patent that really screwed things up in the industry was the infamous Namco patent for mini-games during load screens. Especially back in the day, in the times of early disc games, load times were a huge problem, and Namco had a nifty idea to put small mini-games that were separate from the main game that you could play during those load times. So why didn't this take off? Why didn't like everyone put little mini-games in during their cutscenes? Well, because Namco patented it. And rather than like, you know, pay a fee to them to include mini games during load screens in your game, everyone just chose to not have them at all. Now, immediately you might be thinking, well, wait, I've played games during loading screens. Bayonetta, for instance, as well as wonderful 101 Platinum games often let you like practice combos. Assassin's Creed does something similar, letting you like run around. The Namco patent was specifically for auxiliary games, so games that were completely separate from the main game you were playing. So Ridge Racer let you play Galaxian, which was like a retro arcade shooter, during the load screen. In fact, if you completed it, you'd be able to unlock all the cards in the game. That's what was patented, having a game that's, you know, completely separate from the main game you're actually playing. So yeah, games could skirt the patent by including basically little slices of the main game during load screens because, again, that wasn't like a completely separate game. That is them actively bypassing the patent, which again makes me think, if you didn't have that patent in place for all those years, what sort of cool loading screen minigames would we have gotten? And once more, for the defenders, we know what we got with it, you know, like training games and that. You really think we wouldn't have gotten cooler shit if that patent didn't exist? I mean, especially thinking of some games with long-ass load times that had some creative minds behind them, like, I don't know, Metal Gear Solid 4. I bet Kojima could have thought of some pretty cool shit to throw in there. But, again, nobody did it just because of that patent. People would probably have nostalgia for their favorite loading screen minigames. You'd have top 10 loading screen minigame lists. But we don't. We don't have any of that, all because of that damn patent. And you'll probably see something similar with this. Sure, you'll be able to get around it, but are people even going to want to come anywhere close to it, you know, the Nemesis system, for fear, again, of getting in some legal battle over it? I doubt it, especially if you're a studio smaller than WB. And I mean, if you go back into the history of games, you know, I'd note, think of what the industry would look like if people were patenting, I don't know, randomized loot tables in computer video games, RPG mechanics where your character levels up and becomes stronger. You may think today, like, oh, ChiGuy, those things are so common. They're in like every game. Well, they weren't always. I mean, everything is done for the first time somewhere. And while they wouldn't likely still hold patents over these things today, if we went decades without people being able to build on each other's ideas in these respects, refine things, find new twists still with these core bases, again, yeah, where would the industry even be today? And in terms more of the long-term effects of this, I'm always worried about things becoming a trend, worrying about precedents being set. Obviously, this isn't the first patent we've seen in the industry, but, you know, like I said at the top, WB made multiple attempts at this over several years, trying to patent this mechanic. They were denied until now. In your mind, it might not seem like a big deal to, you know, even avoid a Nemesis type system in your game. If you're making a game, there's a million other different things you could do. But what if more companies see this recent success and try to capitalize on it themselves? Before you know it, you could have hundreds of specific game mechanics being patented, making the development process insanely more complicated because now you've got to be mindful to not quote-unquote copy all these different systems, many of which are built on tons of games that came before it. Or again, you'd have to pay for use of these patented systems, but again, nobody's going to want to do that. And even if you did, I mean, what happens when there's like 8 different companies you're paying fees to use their patented system? It's just, yeah, the more I think about it, the more awful it is. I mean, imagine if you get, you know, some of these companies like EA making a bunch of new patents for their game mechanic, or Nintendo. I mean, they'll hear about a 4th grader drawing Mario in his social studies book and deploy a team of 15 lawyers to sue his ass. You want them doing this shit? And I think a lot of big industry folks who may like the idea now could also come to regret it later if things did get crazy. I mean, how soon you may be the one, how soon WB may be the ones in the position of looking at a mechanic going, oh man, I could really do something cool with that, but damn it, it's patented, so probably shouldn't even touch it. Again, you're only hurting the industry with crap like this. Like I said, these Shadow of Mordor games borrowed from all sorts of other games that came before, but now you're going to try and be like, oh, this one thing that's pretty original in our game, we don't want anyone else to have it. And before I close, another thing I've seen brought up here is people comparing this to like copyrighted IP and characters. You know, if we're letting everyone use different mechanics, if you don't want people patenting things, why can't everyone use, say, Mario or Master Chief in their games? In my opinion, it's just, that's completely different. I mean, for one, no one's trying to stop you from having like a green space marine or an Italian plumber in your game. You just can't have these specific ones. Those rules are a lot clearer. And we do see many characters in games that mimic or even parody those characters. And the terms we're talking about here, again, if you read like what they're talking about with what they include in the Nemesis patent, it's much broader. And even if someone was to use the specific system, like they used it exactly the same, the way I see it, they'd be using it in a different game, different universe with, and this is the key to me, with tons of other mechanics that surely make the game their own. It's not like you're going to have a game that's just the Nemesis system. It's like you would, you know, kind of throw that in with probably a bunch of other things to make your own thing. And that's kind of how I feel with, you know, IP characters. You can make a game, a character that's heavily inspired by another character and put your own little flavor on it, and, you know, it's your own. And to me, that's not all we're talking about here. Again, once more, they may try to make it seem that way, like, oh, you know, we're just protecting our specific thing, but Like, again, I said at the beginning, if you're familiar with patent trolls, this stuff gets out of hand really quick. I'm going to cut the video off here. Let me know your thoughts on this development in the comments. Do you think patenting specific game mechanics is a good thing for the health of the industry? Or would you like to see people continue to be able to freely pull from each other without worrying about running into some sort of legal trouble?